and welcome back to
His Will, Your Life.
My name is Addi.
My name is Hannah.
And we are the hosts of this podcast that you're listening to, His Will, Your Life.
His Will, Your Life is a podcast hosted by us, two teenage girls, to spread the word of the Lord to people of any age.
Today, we will be telling Dinah's story from the Bible.
So 2 things are important for putting this story in context. First, as the chosen people of God's covenant, Jacob and his family were not supposed to intermarry with the native population. Second, the sign of their distinctive relationship with God was circumcision, performed soon after birth.
Very important disclaimers to understand this story, just wanted to say. And I will be reading directly from Genesis 34, if you want to follow along. I use the ESV, but whatever floats your boat. Dinah and the Shechemites. Now Dinah, the daughter Leah had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of the area, saw her, he took her and raped her. His heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. And Shechem said to his father, Hamor, "Get me this girl as my wife." When Jacob heard that his daughter Dinah had been defiled, his sons were in the fields with his livestock, so he did nothing about it until they came home. Then Shechem's father Hamor went out to talk with Jacob. Meanwhile, Jacob's sons had come in from the fields as soon as they heard what had happened. They were shocked and furious because Shechem had done an outrageous thing in Israel by sleeping with Jacob's daughter, a thing that should not be done. But Hamor said to them, "My son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Intermarry with us. Give us your daughters and take our daughters for yourselves. You can settle among us. The land is open to you. Live in it, trade in it, and acquire property in it." Then Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Make the price for the bride and the gift I am to bring as great as you like, and I'll pay whatever you ask me. Only give me a young woman as my wife." Because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. They said to them, "We can't do such a thing. We can't give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will enter into an agreement with you on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all your males. Then we will give you our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we'll take our sister and go." Their proposal seemed good to Hamor and his son Shechem. The young man, who was the most honored of all his father's family, lost no time in doing what they said, because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. So Hamor and his son Shechem went to the gate of their city to speak to the men of their city. "These men are friendly toward us," they said. "Let them live in our land and trade in it. The land has plenty of room for them. We can marry their daughters and they can marry ours. But the men will agree to live with us as one people only on the condition that our males be circumcised as they themselves are. Won't their livestock, their property, and all their other animals become ours? So let's agree to their terms and they will settle among us." All the men who went out of the city gate agreed with Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male in the city was circumcised. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled. They seized their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else of theirs in the city and not in the fields. They carried off all their wealth and all their women and children, taking as plunder everything in the houses. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." But they replied, "Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute?" And that's the end of it. It's very long. That's Dinah's story from the biblical perspective. And we also found another person's a biblical devotional plans version of what happened. So why don't you swing right into that, Hannah?
Yeah, so now we're going to talk about what we can learn from Dinah's story. Genesis 34 shows how often we have thought that we can take care of ourselves and have miserably failed. The life of young Dinah recorded in Genesis 34 is one of these times. We need to know that foolish choices in life can lead to gigantic spiritual struggles. For sure, we cannot take care of ourselves in our acquaintance with God, minus individual or community. The scripture rightly admonishes us in this regard. Do not be yoked together with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? This is from 2 Corinthians 6:14. To choose right, we need wisdom and discernment, which can be given to us by God only. For God says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you and watch over you. From Psalm 32:8. After violating Dinah, Shechem opted to marry her. It would have sounded fair to Dinah's ears, but poor Dinah. Genesis 34:23 says that this guy had malicious intent to grab the livestock and all of the property of Dinah's father Jacob for himself and for his family. Dinah's brothers got wild and devised a hidden plan which was also not right. They agreed to the marriage contract with a condition that the male members of the city had to undergo circumcision. When the men were still in pain incurred from their circumcision rite, the brothers of Leah massacred all of them. Violence and abuse caused to a woman, and malicious intentions led Shechem and his family to be wiped out. Have I been abusive? Have I had violent behaviors and evil intentions in my life? We need to be nonviolent in our behaviors and honest in our contracts and contacts. For this, we need an attitude change. You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Ephesians 4:22-24. Only Jesus can make us truly righteous and just in places where we would otherwise tend to be violent. We cannot take care of ourselves. We need God. We cannot be abusive either. Jesus helps in our struggles. And this is from the YouVersion devotional plan titled Life Lessons from Josiah, Mary, and Dinah.
Well, Dinah had quite a journey in this short amount of time. It sounds like it's only about a week or two, I would say. It doesn't say, because you guys heard the Bible verses, but it doesn't say how long that time is, but I would assume based off the context, it's about a week. Imagine getting raped and then getting told you have to marry this man, and then all of a sudden your brothers come and take you from this horrible man's hands. Like, that's a lot for a person to process, especially a woman at that time. That would have been very hard to do, and I just give props to Dinah. She went through something extremely difficult, and it doesn't sound like it affected her that much. I think we would have heard about it if it affected her that much. But I think it just shows that you can still be strong no matter what happens to you. And it also shows that there are two sides to every story, and both sides can be wrong, and both sides can be right.
Yes, and you mentioned that we don't really hear if it affected her. We don't actually really hear much about her. She's mentioned one more time in the Bible. That's when Jacob's family is getting ready to go to Egypt. And she's just listed as one of the people that's going. So we don't know, if she ever did get married or had children or anything. That's kind of all we know about her, is that what she went through, and then that she was still with her family when they left for Egypt.
And I find that kind of shocking, because if you haven't read the Bible, Genesis is like the family records. It lists everybody who had a child with anybody, and anybody who was a father, and how old they were when they died. It's the way Genesis is. It's so that you can see the family line that leads to Jesus. But again, like Hannah said, we never hear about Dinah again, which is weird, because she was the only daughter of Jacob. Which you would think that's a very important thing, right? But we never hear about it again, which is the oddest thing to me. And I don't get that.
Yeah, especially with what she went through, and because, even like Rahab, who went through not the same thing, but she had a big role in a story. She's mentioned later, several times throughout the Bible, and it's just, obviously there's a reason that she's not in here again. Maybe she didn't get married, maybe she just stayed with her family until she died, and there was nothing else really to add, but and you can get a lot from the few verses that she is in Genesis. You can learn a lot from her story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of the time these certain women that we'll be talking about in this series are overlooked because there's not a lot about them. But just because there's not a lot about somebody doesn't mean you can't learn a valuable lesson from them. Even though somebody might only live till 21 doesn't mean you can't learn wisdom from them. They just had a shorter time on earth, or they just weren't mentioned a lot. I think that's something very important to realize from Dinah's story.
And here's a fun fact that I found looking at stuff about Dinah. In 19th century America, Dinah became a name for enslaved African women.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder why that was the case.
The only thing I can think is that, she was taken and horrible things were done to her, and they were in a similar situation.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, a lot of the time, if you look back on racism in America, they did relate to the Bible a lot, specifically the story of Moses. So I guess it's not that far of a reach to assume they would also look at the story of Jacob and say, oh, I feel like Dinah because, I'm going through all these horrible things. Maybe it not might have been the same things, but I'm still going through horrible things. And I relate to that, I get that. But that's Dinah's story. She's had a very long and short story. Top to the bottom, we went through it. And tell us below if you have any other people you want to hear about. And Hannah, why don't you lead us out?
All right. Thank you for joining us today as we discussed Dinah's story from the Bible.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we strongly recommend that you hit that like, subscribe, or share button down below.
We send our thoughts and prayers out and up to all of you.
And we will see you next time on
His will,
your life.